It's fascinating how throughout the distance of geography and time, human civilizations were creating strikingly similar divine figures, personifications of war, desire, decay, and deception were a really recurring pattern in many cultures. In the Warhammer 40k universe, the Chaos Gods are described as entities born from the emotional and psychological energies, and this gives us a basis to consider their image as archetypical one. But what if these divine figures are reflections of something as fundamental as human nature? This is Kelkoshmach, and in this video we are going to explore the Chaos Gods of Warhammer 40k universe, not only as fictional deities but also as archetypal forces, the forces that have already reappeared in human history multiple times. Khorne represents violence in its most purified and abstract form. Unlike traditional war deities, he's not bothered with strategy, justice, or political necessity. He is violence for the sake of violence. In mythological traditions, the absolute first figure to come across our minds is, of course, ancient Greek Ares, who personifies the brutality of battle. Ares is more impulsive and destructive rather than noble. His Roman cousin Mars seems to be a bit more disciplined, yet not less militaristic for sure. In Norse traditions, the All-Father Odin presides over war and sacrifice in exchange of glory, yet the similarity ends here because Odin is more like the god of victory and strategy, without any recklessness, while true berserkers of the North were the perfect examples of losing themselves in combat frenzy. In Hindu mythology, the mighty goddess Kali, stained in blood and driven by the battle, is the absolute brutality of destruction. And among the Aztecs, Huitzilopochtli, the patron of Mexico and the god of the sun and war, demands continual human sacrifice to sustain cosmic order. Despite their differences, these figures share one common crucial feature: violence is meaningful. It serves divine order, political stability, or cosmic balance. Khorne represents all these ideas radicalized: violence without justification, war without purpose. As long as the bloodshed and legions of Khorne bring skulls to his throne, everything is perfect. Khorne obviously aligns with the archetype of the warrior, but more importantly, with its shadow aspect. The warrior in its integrated form represents discipline, courage, and protection. However, when the shadow is here, these same traits turn into domination, cruelty, and uncontrolled aggression. Historically, this transformation could be seen in figures whose military brilliance coexisted with extreme brutality. When destruction stops being a mean and becomes the defining principle of existence. The finest representation is Genghis Khan, whose legendary military success was accompanied by immense destruction. And also Vlad the Impaler, who transformed violence into a deliberate tool of psychological terror. In both cases, violence transcended utility and became symbolic and even performative. Nurgle embodies decay, disease, and entropy, but also something even more disgusting: total acceptance of it all. Ironically, in real mythology, all such things have taken place for a reason as well. In Mesopotamian pantheon, Nergal was a major deity who governed plague, pestilence, war, and destruction that came violently through epidemics. So plague and death are expressions of divine will, you got it right. By the way, did you know that Apollo, the ancient Greek Mr. Sunshine and the most handsome god, could also inflict disease? Yeah, he was the father of Asclepius the healer, but he wasn't hesitating to use his arrows when someone, according to Apollo himself, had to be punished. Apparently wanted to keep his son busy. Shetala of Hindu cosmology and Babalawai of Yoruba religion are both the representations of illness with the exact same predestination. Both destructive and sacred. Like, world has to and will be healed, but it has to be infected first. So suffering is no longer something to resist, it's something to embrace. This aligns with the Jungian archetype of the father, and again its shadow form, the devouring father. The positive father archetype provides structure, protection, and stability. However, its shadow form emerges when authority becomes suffocating, when care becomes control, and when dependence is enforced. An individual under such influence stops resisting suffering and starts accepting it as inevitable or even desirable. So, if we take a look at the historical context, such archetype plays in the political systems where authority justified widespread hardship as necessity for the greater good. So, as you can see, it's a metaphorical case. It doesn't necessarily mean literal disease, but rather a harm on a global scale. Speaking about hardships for the greater good, we can't help thinking about Mao Zedong, whose ideological vision justified catastrophic human cost, and Joseph Stalin, whose paternal image masked a regime of systematic suffering of the masses. So if we come back to Warhammer 40k, Nurgle, like this, represents not merely disease or death, but the psychological surrender to them. The moment where resistance collapses and decay is comfort. And speaking about father figure, Nurgle is really caring, but only towards his children, the Legion of Pestilence. How cute! Tsench represents the vitality and volatility of change. Being closely associated with sorcery and magic, he operates not through direct force, but through ambiguity, manipulation, intriguing, and transformation. His schemes are complex and unknown, sometimes even for himself. So we are speaking about the trickster figure here, and mythological parallels are truly abundant. And the number one is the one and only Loki from the Norse mythology, the god of fire and mischief. The legendary Yoruba trickster Esho, being a divine messenger, manipulates communication and fate. The coyote figure in Native American traditions embodies chaos as a creative force to catalyze necessary change, and in the end ensuring the evolution of the world. In Egyptian mythology, Thoth governs knowledge and magic, while Set introduces disorder, creating a necessary balance of unpredictability. In Chinese mythology, Sun Wukong was born from a stone, and his superior strength could compete only with his intellect. His rebellious nature and desire for transformation give him all the right to be in this list. All these distinguished gentlemen are united by one simple idea: to destabilize reality. I guess it won't be a shocking revelation that Jung identified this pattern as the trickster archetype, often paired with the magician. The trickster breaks rules, while the magician reshapes reality through knowledge and insight. Both are essential for transformation, but imagine how dangerous their shadow forms can be. Knowledge becomes manipulation, and transformation becomes control. Truth dissolves into illusion, and complexity becomes a tool of domination. Historically, this archetype manifests in individuals who gain their influence through strategy, intellect, and mystique. Political theorists, manipulators of power structures, and charismatic figures who operate behind the scenes, the grey cardinals as they are called. And here I'd easily go for Niccolò Machiavelli, who reframed power as strategic manipulation, and Grigory Rasputin, whose influence operated through charisma, mysticism, and perception. Slanesh is about the most powerful desire, pleasure, and excess. However, it is crucial to distinguish between desire as a human experience and excessive desire in all shapes and forms as an absolute principle, with the twist of called madness. Mythological traditions sacralize pleasure pretty often. For example, Dionysius and his Roman cousin Bacchus represent the ecstatic elation through intoxication and complete loss of self, ritual madness, and last but the most important, hedonism in general and wine in particular. Here also goes Kama from Hindu, the representative of desire as a fundamental force of existence, where the traditions of Tantra are the only path to spiritual realization. Akkadian goddess Ishtar straight up combines femininity and sensuality with power and violence. As we can see, pleasure, disregarding of how destructive it is the way to understand life. Slanesh represents a radical intensification. Desire is no longer one aspect of existence, it becomes the infernal totality with no balance and no restraint. And this aligns with the archetype of the lover, which governs connection, passion, and vitality. In its positive form, the lover enriches life through meaningful experience. However, in its shadow, it manifests as addiction, obsession, and dissolution of identity. And so the individual not just only seeks pleasure, it's driven by it. Well, historically, this pattern can be observed in figures whose lives were defined by excess, whether in power, sexuality, or maybe both. This pattern is super visible in figures such as Caligula, whose reign became the symbol of unstoppable excess of violence and pleasure. And another guy who even gave his name to a certain direction of fetishism, Marquis de Sade. His writings explored the extremes of desire in such a way that sometimes they could be called disgusting. Therefore, Slanesh is not pleasure itself, it's the total collapse of boundaries when pleasure becomes destructive.
Or you would present them, they claim to be the Chaos God, but actually they are not. They claim to be gods. No, I mean the emperor, when he explained what is chaos and gods, he just said that they are just super evil creature from the warp, but they are limited to the warp. I mean, they cannot exist outside of the warp. And if the warp fell or people don't believe in them anymore, they will simply cease to exist.
Warhammer 40k presents these forces in the most extreme, terrifying, violent, and unbalanced forms. And what scares the most about the Chaos Gods of Warhammer 40k is that, disregarding of being fictional characters, they carry the most realistic patterns that have been existing in human behavior, in history, and in myths for centuries. And maybe they are not as far distant as they seem.